Hey there, everybody. Wanted to talk with you really quickly about an innovation that I haven't talked about with you yet that's part of Skeetersoft NPIII. I know I've done a couple of videos on this already because I know there are a lot of you who haven't played this game before. So the reason why we really want to look at this is because this is a bit different from the way that you're used to things working, especially if you're coming from the APBA world. And so we'll just go ahead and take a look here and see what we've got. I've just finished my game up here. We'll switch over to my screen. This should look familiar to you. We'll move this down a little bit here for you. You can see this is the game that was just completed that you just finished watching today. And we'll go over here to options and rules. We're going to take a look at the fielding rules. I'm not going to go over everything here. A lot of this should be familiar. The fielding 1, fielding 2, and fielding 3, the different play result numbers and the positions that they correspond with. Which is very, very similar if it's not exactly the same system. I think it is exactly the same system that Clifford Van Beek came up with. And so that's survived about 100 years, haven't it? How about that? The thing that's different here is right here, this asterisk. On play result numbers 30, 31, 32, 43, 44, and 45, use the outfielder's arm rating. So what that means is that every outfielder has two ratings, a rating for normal defense and a rating for the arm. Normal defensive rating will come first, and then the arm rating will come second. So if we look here at, let's find an outfielder. Wood Conroy actually is a good example because he does have a rating. He has a 1 for his defensive rating, but a 3 for his arm rating. You know, you might wonder, I know that Strat-O-Matic, other games like that usually have like a 5-scale rating system. Why is it so short? It's sort of the way that it works. We'll talk about this more when we look at the fielding system that J. Richard Seitz came up with. That's a long way in the future. People are already complaining to me about how I haven't done enough national pastime stuff, so go figure. Just know that there's a reason why the scale is not quite that apparent and not quite that large between all of the positions in games like this. There is a reason for it, and I think it's actually a pretty good one. So Conroy has this 3 here, which means that he will end up being fielding 1. I know it's counterintuitive, but higher numbers are better, right? And so let's go take a look and see what difference this makes on the board. So we're going to go here as if we had a runner on third base, and we'll look here at, the fielding ratings 1, 2, and 3, right? So Conroy, let's say that we have him over in right field, right? It'll be fly-out runner holds if there's a 32 or if there's a 45, right? Now, if there happens to be a 17, well, that's not going to help him much because that goes based upon his actual fielding rating, right, instead of his arm rating. With fielding 1, which would be a 3 for the arm rating, the runner will hold unless he's got an F. If it's fielding 3, the runner will score unless he's got an S, at which point he was thrown out by the right fielder. And then with fielding 2, the runner will hold, but the F runner will score. And that changes depending upon who's on base, right? So for fielding 1 with runners in first and third, the runners will hold. Fielding 2, 32 and 45, runner holds, but fielding 3 again, 1 will... Actually, the runners hold there as well. Interesting how that is. About to say 1 will score, not always. Sometimes they'll score, sometimes they won't. It depends, and it's different every time around. Fielding 2, for example, with runners in second and third, the 32 will score the runner if that arm rating is a 2, but if it's a 3, the runner will hold. And if it's fielding 1, of course, the runner will hold. And then with the bases loaded, the runners will advance in fielding 1 and fielding 2 and in fielding 3. And this is set up basically, you have to keep in mind that the way that these charts work is there's a lot going on in the background in terms of like the probability of each one of these on-base percentages coming up and on and on and on. So there's a lot that goes into this. But in general, that's sort of the way that it works. That fielding rating will help determine whether the runner advances or whether the runner doesn't. Now, that's a pretty simple system. I'm already done explaining it. That's all that there is to it, really. But it's also very interesting when you start thinking about this, especially in terms of like the way that sabermetrics will measure outfield throwing arms and ratings and all this other stuff, right? One of the problems that the sabermetricians will not tell you about these ratings is that you're dealing with a very low sample size, which is why things seem to be all over the place. I mean, in all sorts of fielding, it's all over the place. I know the guy's out there for a lot of plays, but if we're going to make a big deal out of how like Dave Parker, threw out 5 guys when he was at this age instead of throwing out 10 or something, it's not a huge deal. Your sample size is small. The number of times this situation comes up is very, very small. We probably don't need to cut it with such a fine-tooth comb. We probably don't need to use like this real fine measuring instrument for something that happens very, very rarely, right? This is one of the reasons why I think, and I've thought this for years, that the people who create these simulation games and who have the task of recreating baseball have probably a better handle on what needs to happen than a lot of the sabermetricians. And it's because you can't get that deep down in the weeds. You have to step back and look at the whole forest, right? We've talked a lot about our field and its problems. Our field is especially bad for certain outfielders, and it looks awful for certain guys in baseball history. And you're like, why does it look so bad for them? The reason why it looks so bad for them is because we've lost sight of what's most important. What's most important here is not necessarily, oh my gosh, he didn't throw out 10 runners, he threw out 5 or something, and then the implications that has with the system that you made, or even, oh, well, we credit him with not making the play on X number of fly balls to right or something. I mean, whatever, right? Because in the end, you're making a big deal out of something that's a small sample. If you're trying to make a game, you want to make it flow right, you want to get the numbers right, you're not going to make such a big deal out of small samples. Yeah, something will be wrong every now and then, but for the most part, we're not going to care that much as gamers. We want the thing to be right in general in the big ballpark, and we let other people worry about the little finicky stats. There's my take on that. I'll talk with you later. We got more to talk about. Talk to you later. Bye.